Welcome back. 21-22 season beginning. We're going to kick this one off with the fly we've had a bunch of requests for. It's the Brokeback Crawdaddy. There's a couple things about this fly that have changed over the years. We haven't done this for, this was the original articulated crayfish. Still one of my all-time favorites. Kind of got passed up with the Nancy P, but this my biggest rainbow on this river was on this fly, so still got a special place in my heart. So you can see it's very wiggly, it's kind of counterbalanced, it's got the weight on the back hook and the bottom, and it just, when it swims, it's always fighting itself. It's always, so it never really rides track like this. It just kind of does a lot of this, which is what a crayfish does. If you watch a crayfish swim, they pull with their hind end, and they're basically, they just keep doing this back. They don't go flat. They're in a constant state of movement. They don't swim a lot, contrary to popular belief. They don't hardly ever, but when they do, you see this, they go like this, right? So kind of just the hit list of what you're going to need. And I'm going to go over this hook thing, and I'm going to use a B10S number 4, both hooks. You could go longer in the front hook if you wanted, shorter. It's the movement that they dig on this thing. But I'm going to use a B10S. It used to be a 411S discontinued saltwater hook, and I'll show you that when I get to it. So it was the B10S is what I'm going to use. And like I tell you all the time, you can sub hooks. Just, you can do whatever you want. You'll get the premise of this thing, and you'll just move on. So I'm going to have rubber legs out the front. I'm going to use rubber. I basically do this fly in 2 colors. I do it in this lighter tanny color, and then I do it in an olive. And then I match the legs kind of to that. So this is going to be the root beer on the legs. After that, we're going to have the body. I have historically always used ice dub. Frequently like to blend these a little bit, which I did today here. I might try, Jeremy loves this Simi seal, and it's really, really close to the color that I use for this underbody. I might try that, haven't decided yet. But either one, again, the dubbings, the ice dub, I think everybody's pretty used to. The Simi seal has been around forever. It's used in a bunch of different colors, and a lot of our lake stuff we use this, and so I might be using that. I'm going to have a medium, and again, colored, whatever you like. I've got a bunch of colors in here that, you know, I've seen them tied in chartreuse and black, and I mean, you name it. I'm going to just use this standard original yellow beads. Then you're going to have, for your nose, I'm going to use just regular, this is bleached. If you want to use standard deer hair, fine, doesn't matter. Just whatever you like the looks of. You're basically just, remember what one looks like. You're kind of, color's important, and they're kind of a light belly, and the things that are going to show from the bottom, and that's going to be a little bit of this nose. And then we're going to have the shell back, or the carapace. So today I'm going to use this black barred gold ginger bunny. You know, I use this, any one of these colors. I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's what you like the looks of. I used a lot of this natural bar. Originally, we didn't even have this stuff, so we just did it with regular tones. Love this brown or black tone barred on this olive. I really think that looks just really sexy, but it's just a matter of what you like the looks of. I mean, if I wasn't on that, I was very close to doing it on this original, what's this called, brown barred?
Light brown.
Light brown? Yeah. I love that color. I do a lot, because I like that, a lot of color in the carapace in particular, but if you're using darker colors, try to put something light on the belly, because like I said, when they swim, they do this, and there's this light, dark, light, dark, light, dark. Every time they pull with their hind end, they kind of go over like this, and you get this two-tone. I think that's why a JJ's is so successful. And so lastly is the hackle. I'm going to use a Cree. This is dark barred ginger Cree. This is just a good, in the old days, you know, dark barred ginger is pretty hard to come by, but it's not when you go into, and I just think, and again, whatever you like, but in the old, you know, while back, you could get this pretty readily. Dark barred ginger is getting almost as hard to get as Cree in some ways, but the one place you see it a lot is in this high and dry. and which is a phenomenal neck. I mean, phenomenal dry fly hackle. But down in here, and occasionally when you look at these, you know, your dark barred ginger will be dark barred ginger to here, and then you'll get into the big stuff, right? And it's very often very cree. And so we always number these so you can see what you're looking at. But I just wanted to show you that. And you can really see when you get to the bottom, just cover up the sweet spot of these. And that's when you start getting real cree colors down there that are just really barred heavily. Like I said, the high and dry are still very readily available, and you get more of the bigger hackle than you do with the red label, which is what you're looking for in this particular one. And I'm just using this thing's probably 10 years old. So anyway, I said I would continue with this hook thing because I didn't know it. I've got so many of these. I did not know this until we looked up the hooks today, that the 411S, which I'm going to put in the vise here, just so you can see it a little easier. You can see where this bend is, right? And they don't make this hook anymore. That's one I always use. I have tons of them. And so what I'm going to take the B10S, and it's in a size 4. And what you're going to see, and I'm going to try to do this to the camera behind me here. I don't know which one's going to show up.
Either one.
Either one. But you'll see, I can't quite get them to match up here. So I'm trying to show you the bends. They're almost identical. Dang. If I could get my... It looks like that B10S has got twice the gap, but when you get them laid side by side... I'm having trouble fighting me. When you get them laid side by side like that, when you're trying to pinch this, it's almost identical. I can't keep that from wanting to go down, but you see when it's in there, it's almost identical in gap, a little tiny bit more, but I really like this bend. So I'm going to take this B10S, and I'm just going to take it at the 1/3 point right here, and I'm going to try to keep it, and keep your vise open so you're not pinching this. We've bent other hooks on film before. So I'm just going to do it kind of in 2 pieces, and I'm just going to get a little bit of a bend going up in here. And so when we take those two, and I really think this is important. I got a little bit more bend than that one, not much. Try to get that right beside each other. So you can see it's virtually identical, right? So where that bend is. And the key to that is that when we put this, we're going to tie this upside down. These eyes are going to be sitting right here, so it's going to flip it. So we're going to tie them on top. We've got a nice spot. But when that sits there, it helps it wiggle. It helps that it doesn't run real true. It kind of does this stuff, so you'll see what I mean when you fish it. But anyway, onward and upward. Oh, and I'm using GSP 100 on my thread. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to, and remember, you're going to flip this, right? So your eyes are on top of the hook, so that the hook point, they're going to be offset. And so leave yourself, we're going to tie in a couple things at the head. So leave yourself about 3 turns, 4 turns head. Come back here. And I'm going to take a pair of medium. Sometimes this one, that one I had there, wherever I put it, this one's got large eyes on it. You see they're pretty big. But you don't need a ton. I'm just going to put these on right now so I don't have to fight it when I've got more material, obviously. And so look it over. Just I'm just doing figure 8s right now. And then I'm going to go under the eyes, but on top of the hook. And then I'm going to pinch that in really tight, right? 1, 2 on this way, 1, 2, 3 on this way, whatever. Come around, and I'm squeezing the thread so it's squeezing around the eyes. And so they're pretty, nothing's indestructible, but it's pretty dang close as far as that goes. And so I'm going to start this because, again, when I put the pinchers on, the rabbit, and we have a deer hair head, I want things to kind of fight each other. And this one's going to be down, so when I flip this over, the legs are kind of sticking up a little bit because it's going to constantly try to lay down against the bottom hook when I'm pulling on it. So just set that right there. And again, you'll kind of get an idea where you want that to be. So I'm going to put these, where do those things go to? Take these rubber legs. What do I do with those things? Oh, mercy. I'm going to take these, and I like these two-tones. I tie in the orange, but just take these things and split them right down the middle so you can use them twice so you don't drop them on the floor like I did. And I want these to be about an inch and a half, inch and 3/4 long. You can measure it out, but as long as you tie it in long, you can always cut these things. But when you see it, I want them to flop around back there. So I'm going to tie these in relatively short. I'm going to give it 2 or 3 turns. Just get it started. And just so I can see that it's going down the hook slightly. And then make sure, because we're going to spin hair on this, you know, you can spin hair on almost anything. It doesn't matter on the bulk, but it's really hard to spin hair on rubber. So don't build up. Don't be afraid to get a little bit of a build up right here. If any of that latex is in there showing, when you go to spin this, it'll really fight you. It's a pain in the butt. So that's going to be our pinchers out the front. They're going to be, you know, somewhere in there. And now I'm going to just take some bleached hair. If you want to use natural, that's fine. Doesn't matter. And again, if you're doing another color, use, you know, match the color, olive to olive, whatever. I did some once with black noses because I thought it contrasted really well. It looked really funny to me when it was tied, but I thought it looked cool because it was separating the bodies. Saw no difference in fishing, so it kind of looked funny to me. I see a lot of people changing colors up like that on a lot of flies, so from the traditional, and I think it looks really, on some of them I think it looks really cool. But I don't care what it looks like. It's got a fish, and so I'm going to stack this just so I get a nice clean nose, because if you look at a crayfish, it's got a pointy little nose, right, sticking down there, but it's also got another function. This is what's going to start fighting the eyes. So when you're swimming, it's going to make it try to fight each other themselves. It's floating. The lead eyes are obviously sinking, and so I'm just going to make it fight itself. A little bit more than I want there. So I'm going to set this right over top of these eyes, and it's going to start sticking back. You can see I'll stick it back just a little ways. This is going to have 2 functions. It's going to, 1, look like the nose of the crayfish, and 2, it's going to separate the claws. And you can tie this in as one piece right now, like this. And again, its real function is to separate my claws. So I'm going to let that work down around the hook. I want it to go around, so on the bottom, you could tie it in just like this, and just come forward and nice, clean. This will stop you from having your head want to spin on your hook. Nice tight wraps, right? See how it's standing that hair up? So just right through it. Now come back and set up a dam right here, just because it's just going to work a little bit better if that's back. And so now it's back, and now I'll put one more little spin over top of that. But you saw how easy, and my head's not moving. It's anchored. And I mean, that is truly, man, I would say that is our #1 question we get, and probably all fly time. My head spinning, my collar spinning. And that's one way to stop it right there. So you're just securing, if your head's spinning, you are just not getting that all the way spun around tight, and the thread is what's spinning, it's not your material. So now I'm going to take, I cut that off. You saw I got the thin, skinny ends, you know, the points to my left, and I'm going to take this and I'm going to get right close to it, let it work around, second one, and just pull it. So we need it to spin. Kind of hard to get around those eyes. It'll get around you. So it's got 2 turns. I'm not real tight yet. I just want to get that nice and tight right there. So then I'm going to just cut this at a very severe angle. And I'm going to come in, try not to block that camera right there. I want to see just basically that I've got enough of a bulb here so that I can work my hair around it. Because again, what this thing does is it's a dam simply to push the legs against. The legs are gonna be back here, and I don't want them to come together like this. I want them to have an air gap so it reaches around, And that gives me that air gap. When they swim, their pinchers usually go together, and they turn sideways. You can see right through the pinchers. So that's nice and tight. I kind of packed it in there just a little bit. Got it real tight to the base of it. Now we're just going to have to sit here and trim. Wrong glasses. So just take your time right now. Just come in and, but we want to really, sorry I'm blocking the back camera, but we want a really tight cone. So just pick that stuff up, get as many of those as you can, just get them out of the way. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because it's just kind of, just make sure you don't cut your rubber legs. Cut this one flat on the bottom, come right to your hook. You can pull your legs off to the side, and each side that you're cutting. I've cut lots of those off, I can assure you. Okay, I'm going to, so we're just getting a cone head is all we're doing. Don't cut off your legs. The tighter, I didn't, you know, a lot of times on these things I take the time to spin 2 of them, and I just pack that a little bit tighter. It really, by the time we put everything around it, it's going to be pretty well obscure. You're not going to see any of it to speak of, but it's going to have a function. So I'm going to leave it there. If you want to pack that tighter, it doesn't hurt a thing. If you want to make it, drives me crazy. If you want to make it just a little bit tighter in there, that's fine. So now I'm going to take 2, and I went ahead and cut these in advance, and I cut 2. They're 1 5/8". I believe I measured them 1 5/8". And that's just, you decide what you like on these. But what I do is I take these, and you can measure it. I decided to start measuring a little bit more. I'm going to leave about 5/8 to 3/4, and I'm going to trim the hair off of that. And so what I'm doing is I'm going to be left with about, I'm going to measure it, it's 5/8. So I'm going to do the same thing on both of them. I'm just going to cut the hair at the bottom of the legs. They aren't all fuzzy. They've got pinchers at the end, and that's what you're mimicking with these legs. And so it's fuzzy down here. You can trim that as tight as you want. I like a little bit of that fuzz in there. It just looks sexy when it's in the water. And then I'm going to take this, and if it's really thick hide, and these, by the way, are standard strips, Zonker strips. They're not Magnum. They're not the thick ones. And so make sure that the hide's not too thick. And now we're just going to come in here, and I'm going to lay it right beside it. And when I do that, I think you'll be able to see it in the close-up. Kind of fold it around so it starts, so it just folds around the hook, right? And I'm really tight to the hair right now. And I'm going to take a good clean look. Everything's, I want them to be on the side, right? I don't want them halfway under, halfway over. Just take a look and just come in and secure that down real tight. And again, you can see it's working away from that hair, the deer hair. Take this one, just again, make sure it's not, the hide's not too thick. Just give yourself something to tie into. Same thing. Get on this side. This one's easier because you can see it. Where is it? It's right there. And then when you get comfortable with where it's at, we'll just tie this off. It's going to get covered up. So then kind of take a peek. Make sure your claws are relatively close. So you can see how this is going to air gap right here. It's going to do this when it's obviously it's not going to be tight. But even if you pull on it, I'm pulling on it, right? There's still an air gap in there, and that's going to give you your illusion. So now it's time to decide what color hack or dubbing I'm going to use. I'm going to use Jeremy's. I'm going to use Jeremy's just because he said he likes it so much. There it is, this Arizona Semi-Seal. This is come back here. This is the Amber Olive. This is this is the one I mixed. I mean, you can see the colors are virtually identical, right? And by the way, that's the UV tan, and the UV olive is what I use a lot on mine. And so, get up here. But I'm going to use this stuff. I'm going to counter rib this. I forgot to mention this. This is brassy copper. I'm going to use this for my counter rib. I'm going to hackle it. I frequently get, when fish eat this fly, they frequently eat it. And I mean, they get a hold of it. When fish eat crayfish, they grab them and they smash them. When you get these things, there's 2 hooks. And they will get a hold of this, and they attack the things, right? And they frequently shake their heads when they've got them in their mouths. And so I'm going to counter wrap this. So I just took a piece of wire. It's not very thick. And I spun that around just simply. It's giving me a little bit of bulk right here, but I simply put that so that it can't spin, so you can't pull the wire out. I wrapped it backwards so I couldn't pull the wire out. And then I'm going to go backwards with my hackle, and I'm going to counter rib it, excuse me, with my wire. So we're going to, right here, I'm going to leave this. I don't know if when I was fighting that coming forward, I had a little bit of a, I'm going to build this up just a little bit because I don't want it to fall off. When I was trying to get back there, it was a little bit too slippery. It kept sliding up. Just build a little taper to this stuff. Now here, we have to tie in another piece on the top right here that folds back. Make sure that you're not rushing this head because we got to put a hackle on and we've got to come backwards. So leave yourself plenty of room to attach the hackle. We're going to have another bunny strip on top of this one. So make sure you leave yourself space for that. I've got my dubbing. I'm using my dubbing tool. It's just the rising dubbing tool. Let it hang there playing around. Okay, and I'm going to take this semi-seal, and I'm not going to need much, but I do want it to be kind of picky. It doesn't need to really be too tapered because we're only filling that little tiny bit right there. And so about the same on both ends. Not usually I harp about putting a taper in here. It's not really that big of a deal because I'm going to, and it's going to have a hackle wrapped through it. So you can see how fast that works. I'm just looking things over. I got a little tight up front there. I'm going to pick that out. Just take your time. Just get it how you like the looks of it. Don't like that. But again, most of this is going to get covered up with my hackle anyway. So 2 or 3 secure wrap. I like to just pull on this stuff, especially when I've got something that it can slide off of. And I'm just going to do a figure 8. Remember, this is the top of the hook, right? So I'm just going to figure 8 these eyes so they look like they're dubbing and not thread. But again, most of that's going to get covered up with my rabbit anyway. So you see when I've got this, I've got a pretty long spot for my head still, right? It can be a real problem when you're trying to tie this in. And so make sure you have plenty of space right here. And if you want to, before you put your hackle on, this looks fine. It's all buggy. I don't need to. I was going to take a brush if you want to pick it out just a little bit. Just a nylon brush, whatever, bore cleaning tool, whatever you want to use. And now I'm going to put this Cree on here. It's dark barred ginger, really. And so I'm just kind of looking. I want to make sure I got enough. I want it long enough. Everything's fine. See, a lot of people put their hackle on and before it's so easy to judge. Just go like that and look. You know, don't go until it's the size you want it. So, and this is the legs, right? So this is the biggest part of the fly. So I want it to have, or the legs are sticking out. They're probably a ½ inch long. So just tie that in. And I want 1 or 2 really nice turns right here, right? And says it's going to just kind of start to layer the fly together. And you remember that your shellback or whatever you want, the carapace that's going to be on the top of the hook here, right? And so I've got 2 good turns, and I'm going to go over the eyes just like that. I'm going to put 1 turn there, and then just go back and give it 2 or 3 turns. It's kind of hidden, kind of not. I mean, from the bottom of the fly, when you look at it, you're going to see that, and then just come right through it. Come right back over top of that and grab it. You're not going to lose too much hackle there as far as getting it pinched down. And this is the bottom of the fly, right? So that's what, when you see the legs, that's where you're going to see it. Now I'm going to take, this is going to be, and the best way to do this is to measure it. You're going to get it ready. I've already cut a little, I've cut it so it's tapered so I can tie it in right here. And I'm going to come back and I'm going to measure that, and I want the from underneath here, you'll be able to see, I want it the length of the leather, just the leather is all you're worried about, okay? And I want that to go right to the hook, because we're going to cut it off. I don't want it getting hung up on the hook. We're going to cut that off, pull the hair backwards, and then when we tie this in, we want that to ride right by the hook there. So the hair itself is going to fold back over top, between the hook. So just, I put a little bit of a wedge in there, and then I'm going to just pull it tight. And just secure that. This is, that rabbit will hold really. Of course, right now, if you wanted to, you could throw a drop of glue on there. I'm not going to do it, just to keep things rolling. So when this is tied in, you can see the hide lays down, and the hair itself is going to lay across the top of that. The hook will be exposed. That'll be between the legs. Right now, just take a good look, make sure everything's clean where you want it, and that's just going to be the part that flops around back there. So now, discard, set him off to the side. And by the way, that's a pretty dang good, this is the OG. It's basically the original Crawdaddy, but with a longer shank hook. That's all it was. So this one's just the shank, the articulated version of that. Where did that hook go? So now we need another B10S4. And again, it's in the dang vise, that's where it is. If you wanted to do this with a different hook, it really, the hook's about 3/4 of an inch long. If you, tell you exactly, from the bend, it is 3/4 of an inch long. If you want to take a different hook and sub this, that's fine. I mean, the gap on this one's, the B10S is about the most secure hooking fly I've ever seen, or secure hook for as far as hooking up on fish. It just flat is bitey. It is one of the best hooks I've ever used. I've never had one. I've heard people say they had them straight. I have never had one of these hooks straighten. It's a bass hook. I mean, this is a very strong hook. So no bead on this. We're going to have this thing hanging down here. No bead. We're going to tie it on the side. So make sure, just look at your loop. Make sure that it's running true, not twisted. Don't want it to be sideways when you start fishing this. And I like it to lay down, and I like it to be able to ride pretty close, just like that. So it's following the shank of the hook, right? It'll never get that low. It is just almost impossible for it to get that low. But you can see where the tie-in is. It's right on the edge, coming just as the hook starts to fade away and drop off there. And we're going to take this up, and this is a fly that I really think it's critical on this short shank. If you were using a 3X long hook on this, it would be one thing, but I think it's really important that you put this wire back through the eyes on these. I know a lot of people want to glue them, And I've glued them and not had them come out either, but it's such a short tie-in that I really think it's important that you come up here, drop those through, get really tight. See how I'm holding the hook so I'm cranking on the hook, right? Get really tight to it. Take your thumbnail, stick it right tight in there to the bottom, and just crank that down. You still have, your eye is completely open. There's no, but it's impossible to pull this off right now. And so I think that's important. I'm just not confident that'll hold without wrapping it back through. If you want to glue it now again, great, do it. I'm going to grab another ginger. I'm looking for the biggest. I could have used the other end of that, but I'm looking for the biggest hackle in here. And again, this is why I could use that. I don't want to use the one over there because it's for sale, but you want the biggest hackle, and it's a good use for these things that aren't really, you buy these crays and dark barred gingers for the sweet spot right here. Jeremy, he uses his cray, which is sacrilegious, for musky flies.
But you can actually see it.
Because we're going to do a thing on cray here in a couple days. I don't know when it'll show, but debunking cray. But when you wrap cray hackle, people want to pretend that it's going to be a two hackle substitute. When you wrap cray, you really, even on this dark barred stuff, it's all the same. You really lose a lot of the effect that you get when it's layered there. So I've got a really stemmy, I've got the end of this thing and it's really got a thick stem, but it's where the hackle is. It's really fighting me. Let me take that off. That is what Tom Whiting brought to the world. See how thick this stem is? It's really hard to get that on there. So I'm just going to, I just shorten it up a little bit so I could get even turns around it. So this is just basically a cover. And we're going to have another cover here in a second with the rabbit.
Kick that neck out.
Huh?
You kick that neck out. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So that just comes in here and covers things up, and I'm going to take it and fold it back even a little bit more right over top. By the way, I haven't tied one of these flies in 10 years. I'm sure I'll find something I forgot. Okay, so now we have to tie in the shell back, and this has to lay, we want this to lay in here on top, right? And so I really think, and I've done it on some of my own, but from a commercial perspective, it just doesn't look good as it does if you tie it the way I'm going to. It just, but on a lot of mine, I will dub this forward. I'm going to dub over this a little bit, dub this forward, and I simply tie it in and leave it just like that. And it wiggles around a little bit, but I'm doing the original form because that's one we're going to do. But when I did that on a lot of them, I take it and I tie it in right here, and I'm going to dub this, and I don't put any legs underneath there. I dub this in, and I let it hang back, and I cut it right where the leather would be right there. So I don't know if that is making sense. So I would tie it in so you can see where the leather is under here, and I would have it fold right over top of that one, right? But on the originals, I did it like this. Come in and you cut this off, but you saw the other way, and I do that on a lot of my own. It flops around back there. So just wet that a little bit, and this is going to push our hackle back a little bit more. Just secure that. And so now what you're seeing is when I do this, it's going to lay back anyway, right on top, and it's going to kind of make it look a little bit more homogeneous as one piece. I truly think you could skip this. Like I said, I do it both ways on my own. So it's a little bit more dubbing. So I kept pushing that back just a little bit. Make sure that's really well, really secure right there. Now we just advance forward and make sure that you leave enough room for this to, about 2 or 3 turns, because we're going to leave this rabbit leaning forward. So you'll see in a second. And again, we want this kind of fuzzy, because when you look at the underside of these, they have little tiny legs, or little tiny whisker-like things, and just make it look picky, make it look fuzzy, and it just makes it look more lifelike in the water. The biggest part of this is this two-tone effect. Whether you want a light, and I don't care which one you do, what color you do, make sure the belly is either cream or light olive. Anything, just make sure it's a nice, clean, visible, bright color. So I'm going to take this and pull it right tight to that, so I get a little bit of bump right here, pushing that hackle back a little bit. About every 3rd or 4th one, just give it a nice tight pull, too tight. Come back here. Don't do that very often with GSP. Screw up.
We'll say
good way to start the season. Broke my thread for the first and last time of the year. Yeah, right. So I'm going to pick this out. Not that I don't really care about the top. I want the bottom to be nice and picky. You can trim out that later if you want, but make sure it's off to the sides. And you got. So I had a little bit of a tie-off problem there. Okay, now we're going to take this shell back, and we're going to pull it, make sure everything's where you want it. If you need to adjust something, adjust it now. Shouldn't have to. And then we're going to pull this hair, and I want it stretched out just a little bit, so you don't want it really loose. If it's really loose, because we're not going to tie this down, right? And it's one of the, and a fish gets in there, and if it's really loose, when he gets a bite on it, it's going to pull out. That's one of the reasons that it doesn't hurt to cut it right off, or not to tie it in. I mean, let it just hanging back there, because it's hard to cut it off. So you see I left that hanging out the front. I want that there on purpose. It gives you a great tie-in, and just come back underneath, get underneath here. We're going to leave it because if you look at its hind end, it's really, when you look at their hind ends, it's just got this little scoop, right? That's how they propel themselves. And I just kind of, I leave it there just because it looks a little bit more like the hind end of the thing. Probably when it's wet, it doesn't mean much. So, but everything, you build all that stuff in, even the stuff that I constantly say that, you know, it doesn't really mean that much. But when you put them all together, maybe it does. And it does help you, you know you did it on purpose. So now I've got the pinchers back here, and you can see I'm just getting it a little bit damp, my fingers. So you can see how it's going to ride as one thing, right? This is going to stick up a little bit. This thing's going to, its legs are sticking down there. It's all going to get wet. And when this thing starts going in the water, it just really flops around like this, right? And then when it's wet, all those things are going to lay together. The back will all lay together, look like a crayfish back, just like this. Is that a better camera there?
Yep.
Right there. So you can see it all, and it's just going to, it fights itself. It just keeps everything about that little hair head, the hair back there, the eyes are hanging down, so it's always kind of, the water will be pushing it up like this, right? It's always doing that. But then they're trying to fight it. And then there's a little bit of flotation in that nose. So what it does is it kind of gets it doing this stuff. It doesn't just track like a minnow. It tracks like a crayfish, which is pulsing. They don't swim like a minnow. They go at little tiny pop, pop, pop. They're always pulling with their hind end. And every time it does, these legs come together like that. You can see how there's this air gap built in here. Absolute money. That's what they see, that air gap, and that thing's flopping back and forth, and it articulates up and down and back and forth. This is a dynamite fly. Like I said, biggest fish I've ever got rainbow-wise in this river was on this fly, in the olive version. But I hope you like it. Welcome back. See you next week.